Are you serious? I gotta type in a pin? Are you guys kidding me? All right. 991 9. Are you serious? I gotta type in a pin? Are you guys kidding me? Okay, so this is gonna be a pain in the behind. All right. Okay. Anyway, hopefully that keyboard eventually connects. All right, let's see here. So we're going to be doing Leviticus 2 to 6, guys. All right, so let me get program going here. I had to actually get rid of that Opera GX browser. It was messing up lately. All right. Let me see here. We go to it's not connected to it. All right. Let's see here. Let's go to the Word software here to get started. I'll start us off at chapter 2. Oh, well. All right. Okay. All right. So let me just get rid of this. I'll worry about connecting that later. All right. Here we go. Leviticus chapter 2. So we're going to be continuing here with the grain offerings and all that. So if in your English Bible, wherever it says meat, just FYI, that is a very old Middle English term for food. Doesn't always mean animals. So when it says meat offering, it just means food offering or grain offering. Okay, so here we go. Leviticus chapter 2, verse 1. And I think for this one, we can use the Brens. I don't think it's going to be a big difference. There's the LXXE. Aha, there you are. All right, here we go. And if a soul brings a gift, a sacrifice to Yahuwah, his gift shall be fine flour. He shall pour oil upon it and shall put frankincense on it. It is a sacrifice. And he shall bring it to the priest, the sons of Aaron, and having taken from it a handful of fine flour with oil and all its frankincense, then the priest shall put the memorial of it on the altar, sacrifice an odor, sweet savor to Yahuwah. Okay. And the remainder of the sacrifice shall be for Aaron and his sons a most set apart portion for the sacrifices of Yahuwah. Okay. Either baked in the oven. And if he bring it as a gift, a sacrifice baked from the oven, a gift to Yahuwah, fine flour, unleavened, kneaded bread kneaded with oil, and unleavened cakes anointed with oil, or on a plate. So this is going to be talking about, I believe, if they fry it. And if your gift a sacrifice from a pan, it is fine flour mingled with oil, unleavened, and you shall break them into fragments and pour oil upon them. It is a sacrifice to Yahuwah. And if your gift be a sacrifice from the hearth, and again, I'm trying to remember what that word hearth means. Yeah, I'll have to look that up afterwards.
That would be kind of like a fireplace type deal.
Yeah, hearth. Yeah. Okay, thanks, brother Yahusha. Yeah, so it's like a fireplace, like a fire pot. Okay, yeah. And he shall offer the sacrifice which he shall make of these to Yahuwah, and shall bring it to the priest. And the priest shall approach the altar and shall take away from the sacrifice a memorial of it. The priest shall place it on the altar, a burnt offering, a smell of sweet savor to Yahuwah, and that which is left of the sacrifice for Aaron and his sons most set apart from the burnt offerings of Yahuwah. And he shall not leaven any sacrifice which you shall bring to Yahuwah, for any leaven or any honey you shall not bring of it to offer a gift to Yahuwah. So that's interesting. Yeah. It has to be unleavened, and you can't use honey. Very interesting. So now this is going to be talking about the first fruits offering. You shall bring them the way of fruits to Yahuwah, but they shall not be offered on the altar for a sweet smelling savor to Yahuwah. And every gift of your sacrifice shall be seasoned with salt. And this is like really where you can see a parallel between the Tanakh and the Brit here. How Yahusha talks about we should not be those that lose our salt, right? We're living sacrifices, all that. So it's saying here, every sacrifice must be seasoned with salt. Omit not the salt of the covenant of Yahuwah from your sacrifices. On every gift of yours you shall offer salt to Yahuwah your Elohim. Go ahead, Brother Yahusha. See, you got your hand up.
When I was looking at that, it was either yesterday or the other day, what I was seeing was that, like, what came to mind is that, if you lose your life, you shall save it. But if you try to find your life, you lose it, right? And like salt is other than just taste, it's something that preserves. It causes things to be preserved from going bad. And so, like, you had this thing that's preserving, but it's being put on something that's being laid down, something that's being slaughtered, like in the same way that, Yahusha laid his life down, but by laying his life down, he preserves our life. So I just thought that was interesting. Like, you put the salt on something that's being killed, and it just reminded me of, like, like if we lay down our life, if we lose our life, it shall be preserved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's kind of like you either can live your best life now and not be preserved, or you can preserve your life for eternal life right now and completely impale your flesh spiritually and completely give up, like Masha did, how Paul talks about in Hebrews, that he had a choice to make between being esteemed with Pharaoh and his household versus following Messiah, and he decided to follow Messiah and forsake the riches of the world. And so in that way, Masha preserved his life. And that's just one example of what Brother Yahush is talking about. There's many examples in the Brit about that, about impaling your flesh, as it says, is actually talking about forsaking your personal wants and desires that your flesh wants, for Yahuwah's will and all that. Yeah. The offering of the first fruits in the ear. Wonder if it's talking about an ear of grain or an ear of corn here. And if you would offer sacrifice of first fruits to Yahuwah, new grain, ground, roasted for Yahuwah, so shall you bring the sacrifice of first fruits. And this is a major difference you're going to see here with the Masoretic. The Masoretic changed new to green, which again, if think about this for a second, right? Are you going to give Yahuwah a grain offering of stuff that hasn't been fully ripened? I don't think so. This is why we got to be careful with the Masoretic text, and might not be a Masoretic text thing because I'm not looking at the concordance right now. It could be a translator issue, because I know the King James and others that use a template of the King James for their English translations, they'll translate 2 or 3 different Hebrew words for green ears. So they could be mistranslating that as well. So anyway, you shall pour oil upon it and shall put frankincense on it. It is a sacrifice. Okay, so oil and frankincense. And the priest shall offer the memorial of it from the grains with the oil and all its frankincense. It is a burnt offering to Yahuwah. And one thing that I want to say before my mom takes over for chapter 3, what I also noticed in this chapter is that there's a distinction about these. There's certain burnt offerings they could actually eat of. So basically in the priesthood, you have what's called a regular burnt offering, and then you have in the Septuagint, it'll be worded, a ascended offering will be worded as a whole burnt offering, meaning the whole thing must be burnt. You can't eat of it. So there are differences even within the burnt offerings. There's 2 types of burnt offerings. So just don't get confused by that when you see some chapters talking about is the priest's portion to have part of that burnt offering. Then you see other chapters where it says they have to burn the whole thing on the altar. So I just wanted to explain that before my mom continued our reading here. So hopefully that makes some sense there. Would you like to read chapter 3, Mom?
Sure.
Okay.
This is laws for peace offerings. If his offering is a sacrifice of peace offering, if he offers an animal from the herd, male or female, he shall offer it without blemish before Yahuwah, and he shall lay his hand on the head of his offering and kill it at the entrance of the tabernacle. And Aaron's sons, the priests, shall throw the blood against the sides of the altar, and from the sacrifice of the peace offering, as a food offering to Yahuwah, he shall offer the fat covering the entrails and all that. Sorry.
You have a hard
All
time.
the fat that is on the entrails, and the 2 kidneys, and the fat that is on them, at the loins, and the long lobe of the liver, that he shall remove with the kidneys. Then Aaron's son shall burn it on the altar, on top of the burnt offering, which is on the wood on the fire. It is a food offering with a pleasing aroma to Yahuwah. If his offering for a sacrifice of peace offering to Yahuwah is an animal from the flock, male or female, he shall offer it without blemish. If he offers a lamb for his offering, then he shall offer it before Yahuwah, lay his hand on the head of his offering, and kill it in front of the tabernacle. And Aaron's sons shall throw its blood against the sides of the altar. Then from the sacrifice of the peace offering, he shall offer as a food offering to Yahuwah. Its fat he shall remove the whole fat tail, cut off close to the backbone, and the fat that covers the entrails, and all the fat that is on the entrails, and the 2 kidneys with the fat that is on them, at the loins, and the long lobe of the liver, that he shall remove with the kidneys, and the priest shall burn it on the altar as a food offering to Yahuwah. If his offering is a goat, then he shall offer it before Yahuwah, and lay his hand on its head, and kill it in front of the tabernacle. And the sons of Aaron shall throw its blood against the sides of the altar. Then he shall offer from it as his offering for a food offering to Yahuwah, the fat covering the entrails and all the fat that is on the entrails, and the 2 kidneys with the fat that is on them at the loins, and the long lobe of the liver, that he shall remove with the kidneys. And the priest shall burn them on the altar as a food offering with a pleasing aroma. All fat is Yahuwah's. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations, in all your dwellings places, that you eat neither fat nor blood.
Okay, so let's talk about this because this is a pet peeve I have about this Hebrew roots movement and us not taking stuff in context. Okay, so Mom, pop quiz, what type of fat is this chapter talking about?
It's talking about the fat that's on the organs, the inner organs.
More specifically, what did you read earlier in the chapter? Fat for what? Is
entrails.
no. You're missing the point. Is this talking about fat of animals that we're eating or being sacrificed?
Being sacrificed.
Thank you. So this is what we need to understand. When you get down to verse 16, you have to, and I stress, brothers and sisters, have to take into consideration the prior verses to understand this command. Okay, you cannot take one isolated verse in Torah and read into the text and take your own interpretation of the text. The text of the whole chapter is talking about offerings. It is not talking about animals you eat for food. Okay, go ahead, Brother Yahusha.
Yahuwah will say something in one place, and then you get farther along, and he doesn't always seem to feel like he has to explain it verbatim every single time. So like this instance, we have this isolated verse at the end, and when you compare this to everything else, like obviously this chapter, but then you compare it to Pesach, where we're commanded to eat the whole lamb, head to toe or head to tail with the entrails. You have to take all that into consideration. And like another one, like, is you have a verse that says, whoever shall strike man shall die by the sword. And that verse in and of itself, that's all it says. Literally, it doesn't talk about whether you struck him premeditated, whether you murdered him. It just literally says that. But if you take that into consideration with the whole context of scripture, we know that Yahuwah, he distinguishes between murder premeditated versus just killing someone. We know he even commands people to kill someone. So even though that verse doesn't say like, okay, whoever murders someone or whoever hated someone in their heart and premeditated on it and then killed them, like it just says whoever strikes man. But we know that has to be talking about premeditated, just based off of Yahuwah's character, based off of what we've already read in the Torah. So yeah, I agree. You can't just take one verse. Like it might seem that way, but you have to compare it with everything else that scripture has already said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good point, brother. And that's why, honestly, our fellowship, by the way, just an announcement, we will be doing a study about that topic in depth, Yahuwah willing, at a very near soon date, whenever we're able to, because it's very important. Because this is the difference between keeping Torah in context and becoming rabbinical in your walk. And this is the distinction. If you're not taking stuff in context, you're going to constantly break Deuteronomy 4 verse 2. You're going to constantly do that because you're not going to understand what Yahuwah has given us in context, like me and Brother Yahusha are talking about here. If you don't read the whole chapter in context, you're going to think he doesn't want you to eat fat at all. And by association, you're adding to Torah. So it is a big deal. And also it's going to be a big deal when you're fellowshipping with other people that do understand the right interpretation of this, and you're still struggling with understanding this, and you're almost putting a heavy burden on other people to not eat fat around you. For example, because your brother and sister's not going to want to put a stumbling block around you, so now they can't eat fat because you're not understanding this in context. So it is important to understand all the Torah in context. If we don't take context, we're going to constantly add to his law. And I can use many more examples. This is not the only example. I can use many more examples. I can use, what's another good one? Is it a sin to shave or not for us guys? Another perfect example, where we start putting heavy burdens for ourselves. Go ahead, Brother Yahusha.
Excuse me. You also have to take into consideration, like, why was he writing this? Because I've heard the argument, like, okay, well, why is he including blood there? When that command is for everyone. But just in this context, he's writing specifically to the to the Luim, who, if he's having to say it, then that means that there was a problem going on. He doesn't just say it just to do it. He says elsewhere, I think in the New Covenant, that he added things to the Torah or he wrote them down, because of the add-on of transgressions. So it would be my opinion. I can't prove it, but I would imagine that these Luim were eating of offerings. They were eating of the blood and they were eating of the fat. Offerings that were supposed to be for Yahuwah. That would just be an assumption of mine.
Yeah, there is actually proof to what you're saying here in a way. Because I forget if it's in Leviticus or in Deuteronomy, where Yahuwah, to your point, actually adds another commandment talking about you can't just offer me sacrifices wherever you want anymore, right? He says, you guys have guilty inclinations. I don't, basically he's not trusting them anymore to sacrifice animals to him wherever they want. And he's like, you have to bring it to the door of tabernacle. So it might have even been before Leviticus. And he's like, I'm not going to allow you guys to sacrifice to demons anymore. So it seems like that, yeah, they definitely, the Levites definitely had a problem with being true to Yahuwah's sacrifices, the ordinances of the sacrifices. And I could easily see them, eating the fat, not wanting to give the fat to Yahuwah to be burned on the altar. I could easily see that happening. And the blood. And by the way, those that want to use the blood and say, well, the blood's mentioned too. Yeah, but the blood was a commandment way before the Levitical priesthood, and it's separate from the fat. Has nothing to do with the fat commandment. I can show people from Genesis 9. It was clearly talking about fat in general, not just fat of the sacrifices. So those are two different. We also have to understand and be able to rightly divide the word, right? Like how 2 Timothy says, okay, we got to be able to rightly divide stuff in Torah, understand context line upon line between different commands. The blood in general was not even allowed to be eaten way before the law of Moses came about. You can go to Genesis 9. Like I said, Yahuwah says, don't eat the blood at all in that chapter. So that was already a previous command. You can't be confusing the two. So we got to keep everything in context, like me and Brother Yahushua are saying here. We got to keep everything in context. And if I'm not mistaken, from what my mom read here, it starts off by saying, I don't know if it verbatimly says speak to the priest, but it's very clear that the majority of this chapter is for the priests. Here we go. Aaron's sons, the priests. So the whole chapter, as far as the fat's concerned, the whole chapter is about the priests. So he's not even talking to children of Israel. So clearly it has to be talking about sacrifices. And like I said, that's why it's important to read the chapter front to back. At the minimum, my general rule when reading scripture is read the previous couple verses to an isolated verse, and if there's any verses after, to get the context. That's the best thing you can do if you're new to the Bible. I would say read the whole chapter. That's my way of doing things. When something's in question. But it's very clear multiple times in this chapter. I actually wrote it down as my mom was reading. Before you even get to verse 16, about 3 or 4 times from verses 3 to 9, it keeps saying the fat of the sacrifices. So again, that's another law. I don't know anyone that's viewing or listening knows about this, but there's a law that Paul talks about in the New Testament, the law of 2 or 3 witnesses. All truth is established, right, on 2 or 3 witnesses. Well, you got 2 or 3 witnesses before you even get to verse 16. That's talking about the fat of the peace offerings, clearly. So that's what we also need to take into context, is always look at the verses prior to that verse in question, and if there's any verses after. That's my recommendation. And I'll end with that. That's my recommendation for that. So, anyway, let's see here. I think, Brother Yahushua, would you like to read chapter 4? Here. Can anyone hear me? Oh, I think he's muted. Anyone would like to read chapter 4 of Leviticus? Can anyone hear me? Going once, twice. Anyone want to read chapter 4?
I'll read it.
All right, thank you, sister. Thank you.
And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Yisrael, saying, If a soul shall sin unwillingly before Yahweh in any of the commandments of Yahweh concerning things that he ought not to do, and shall do some of them, if the anointed priest sin, so as to cause the people to sin, then shall he bring for his sin, which he has sinned, an unblemished calf of the herd to die for his sin. And he shall bring the calf to the door of the tabernacle of the witness before Yahweh. And he shall put his hand on the head of the calf before Yahweh, and shall slay the calf in the presence of Yahweh. And the anointed priest who has been consecrated, having received of the blood of the calf, shall then bring it into the tabernacle of witness, and the priest shall dip his finger into the blood, and sprinkle the blood 7 times before Yahweh over against the veil. And the priest shall put of the blood of the calf on the horns of the altar of the compound incense, which is before Yahweh, which is in the tabernacle of witness. And all the blood of the calf shall he pour out by the front of the altar of whole burnt offerings, which is by the doors of the tabernacle of witness. And all the fat of the calf of the sin offering shall he take off from it, the fat that covers the innards, and all the fat that is on the innards, and the 2 kidneys, and the fat that is upon them, which is on the sides, and the caul that is on the liver with the kidneys. Burn them. Them shall he take away. As he takes it away from the calf of the sacrifice of peace offering, so shall the priest offer it on the altar of burnt offering. And they shall take the skin of the calf, and all of his flesh, and the head, and the extremities, and the body, and the dung, and they shall carry out the whole calf out of the camp into a clean place, where they pour out the ashes, and they shall consume it there on wood with fire. It shall be burnt on the ashes poured out. And if the whole congregation of Yisrael trespass ignorantly, and a thing should escape the notice of the congregation, and they should do one thing forbidden of any of the commands of Yahweh, which ought not to be done, and should transgress, and the sin wherein they have sinned should become known to them, then shall the congregation bring an unblemished calf of the herd for a sin offering, and they shall bring it to the doers of the tabernacle of witness. And the elders of the congregation shall lay their hands on the head of the calf before Yahweh, and they shall slay the calf before Yahweh. And the anointed priest shall bring in of the blood of the calf into the tabernacle of witness, and the priest shall dip his finger into some of the blood of the calf, and shall sprinkle it 7 times before Yahweh in front of the veil of the sanctuary. And the priest shall put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of the incense of composition, which is before Yahweh, which is in the tabernacle of witness. And he shall pour out all the blood at the bottom of the altar of whole burnt offerings, which is by the door of the tabernacle of witness. And he shall take away all the fat from it, and shall offer it up on the altar. And he shall do to the calf as he did to the calf of the sin offering. So shall it be done, and the priest shall make atonement for them, and the trespass shall be forgiven them. And they shall carry forth the calf whole without the camp, and they shall burn the calf as they burnt the former calf. It is the sin offering of the congregation. And if a ruler sins and shall break of all the commands of Yahweh his Elohim, and shall break one of the commands, not all of the commands, of Yahweh his Elohim, doing this thing which ought not to be done unwillingly, and shall sin and trespass, and his trespass wherein he has sinned be known to him. Then shall he offer for his gift a kid of the goats, a male without blemish, and he shall lay his hand on the head of the kid, and they shall kill it in the place where they kill the victims for whole burnt offerings before Yahweh. It is a sin offering. And the priest shall put some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger on the horns of the altar of whole burnt offerings. And he shall pour out all its blood by the bottom of the altar of whole burnt offerings. And he shall offer up all his fat on the altar as the fat of the sacrifice of peace offering, and the priest shall make atonement for him concerning his sin, and it shall be forgiven him. And if a soul of the people of the land should sin unwillingly in doing a thing contrary to any of the commandments of Yahweh, which ought not to be done, and shall transgress, and his sin should be known to him, wherein he has sinned, then shall he bring a kid of the goats, a female without blemish, shall he bring for his sin, which he has sinned. And he shall lay his hand on the head of his sin offering, and they shall slay the kid of the sin offering in the place where they slay the victims for whole burnt offerings. And the priest shall take of its blood with his finger, and shall put it on the horns of the altar of whole burnt offerings. And all its blood he shall pour forth by the foot of the altar. And he shall take away all the fat, as the fat is taken away from sacrifice of peace offering. And the priest shall offer it on the altar for a smell of sweet savor to Yahweh. And the priest shall make atonement for him, and his sin shall be forgiven him. And if he should offer a lamb for his sin offering, he shall offer it a female without blemish, and he shall lay his hand on the head of the sin offering, and they shall kill it in the place where they kill the victims for whole burnt offering. And the priest shall take of the blood of the sin offering with his finger, and shall put it on the horns of the altar of whole burnt offering. And he shall pour out all its blood by the bottom of the altar of whole burnt offering. And he shall take away all its fat, as far as the fat of the lamb of the sacrifice of peace offering is taken away. And the priest shall put it on the altar for a whole burnt offering to Yahweh. And the priest shall make atonement for him for the sin which he sinned, and it shall be forgiven him. Sorry about my voice. It's about gone.
You did a great job, sis. You did a great job. No problem about your voice. You didn't sound that bad. I really appreciate it, though. I know you did a great job for not having a full utilization of your voice.
Yeah, I've had this cold for over a month, and it just seems to be lingering.
Yeah, there's something going around this year because my mom, same thing with her. She's having a little thing going on. Sadia as well. Speaking of hoarse voice, I always get at this point. I always get to that once I start drinking coffee, then trying to read. Okay, so let's see here. I'm trying to think if there was anything really for us to expound upon there. I don't think there was anything different there than the previous chapter, other than you got the whole burnt offerings being mentioned, and which I expounded on already before. A whole burnt offering, the difference there is you're not, the priest or his sons are not eating of a whole burnt offering. It's wholly burnt on the fire. Which example of this would be the red heifer ashes. That's a whole burnt offering. You're not eating of the red heifer. So many examples of this in scripture where you have a whole burnt offering and then a regular burnt offering. Interestingly enough, the chapter Sister Shoshana just read was all about unwillful sins. So these are offerings for sins that, by mistake, anyway, so that's what this chapter was really about. What's interesting is that it talks about silver in verse 18. Oh, my bad. No, that's the next chapter. My bad. Don't want to spoil it, but starts talking about silver and all that, and that actually connects to Yahusha. So in the next chapter, we'll really get into some of the parallels between Yahusha and the sacrifices and silver and all that. How Kapha says that we were not purchased with silver, and we were purchased by his blood and not silver, and the difference in how you would ransom your soul in the Tanakh versus the Brit, the first covenant versus the new covenant, and how that's different. That he did a once and for all ransoming of our souls. So in the millennial, I doubt, I've been looking more into this. I don't want to say for sure I know this, but I'm kind of leaning towards that. Ransoming your own soul is probably not going to be in the priesthood. I seriously doubt it. Where they would have to give silver, they would have to pay a certain amount of silver to ransom their lives. I don't think that's anymore. That might have been one of the changes in the Torah. Because Kapha makes a mention about that he says, you've not been ransomed with gold or silver, but by the blood of Yahusha. So it seems like that might have been changed, where no longer do you need to ransom your own soul year after year after year. So who wants to read next? We're at Leviticus 5 here. Whoever wants to read next, feel free. I know Brother Dennis, you haven't read yet, and I think I don't know if you or Brother Yahusha would like to read this next chapter. Trying to see what other readers we have here.
If nobody else wants to read,
I would,
go
but I'm
ahead.
gonna pass. No, I would love to, but
I think
give
you
us some
gotta rest.
character.
I think you gotta take the day off, sis.
I'm gonna pass the
Rest
baton.
up.
Mathematic to another
Just
here.
rest up. you know.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love you guys.
I love you too, sis.
Yeah.
No, you can add some character to the sound. I'm just kidding.
All
It'll
right.
be a snot. It'll be a. It'll be a snot coughing read.
Oh boy.
If no one
Yeah.
else wants to read, I don't mind. But
Good.
see
Read
if
on,
anybody
guys.
else wants to read.
Go ahead.
All right. What am I reading? Leviticus 5.
Yes, sir.
And if a soul sin and hear the voice of swearing, and he is a witness, or has seen or been conscious, if he does not report it, he shall bear his iniquity. The soul which shall touch, hold on, let me read that again, because if a soul sin and hear the voice of swearing, and he is a witness, or has seen or been conscious, if he does not report it, he shall bear his iniquity. That soul which shall touch any unclean thing, or carcass, or unclean being taken of beasts, or the dead bodies of abominable reptiles, I don't think that word should be there, which are unclean, or carcasses, or of unclean cattle, or should touch the uncleanness of a man, or whatever kind, which he may touch, and be defiled by, and it should have escaped him, but afterwards he should know, then he shall have transgressed. That unrighteous soul which determines with his lips to do evil or to do good, according to whatsoever a man may determine with an oath, and it shall have escaped his notice, and he shall know, and so he should sin in one of these things. Then shall he declare his sin in the things in which he has sinned by that sin. And he shall bring for his transgressions against Yahweh, for his sin which he has sinned, a ewe lamb of the flock, or a kid of the goats for a sin offering, and the Kahan should make an atonement for him for his sin which he has sinned, and his sin shall be forgiven him. And if he cannot afford a sheep, he shall bring for his sin which he has sinned 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons to Yahuwah, one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. And he shall bring them to the Kahan, and the Kahan shall bring the sin offering first, and the Kahan shall pinch off the head from the neck and shall not divide the body. And he shall sprinkle of the blood of the sin offering on the side of the altar. The rest of the blood he shall drop at the foot of the altar, for it is a sin offering. And he shall make the second a whole burnt offering as it is fit, and the Kahan shall make atonement for him, or for his sin which he has sinned, and it shall be forgiven him. And if he cannot afford a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, then he shall bring as his gift for his sin the 10th part of an ephah of fine flour for a sin offering. He shall not pour oil upon it, nor shall he put frankincense upon it, because it is a sin offering. And he shall bring it to the Kahan, and the Kahan, having taken a handful of it, shall lay the memorial of it on the altar of whole burnt offerings to Yahweh. It is a sin offering. And the Kahan shall make atonement for him for his sin, which he has sinned in one of these things, and it shall be forgiven him. And that which is left shall be the Kahanim's as an offering of fine flour. And Yahuwah spoke to Mashah, saying, the soul which shall be really unconscious and shall sin unwillingly in any of the Kadash things of Yahweh shall even bring to Yahweh for his transgression a ram of the flock without blemish, valued according to shekels of silver, according to the shekel of the sanctuary, for his in which he transgressed. And he shall make compensation for that in which he has sinned in the Kadash things, and he shall add the 5th part to it and give it to the Kahan, and the Kahan shall make atonement for him with the ram of transgression, and it shall be forgiven him. And the soul which shall sin and do one thing against any of the commandments of Yahweh, which is not right to do, and has not known it, and shall have transgressed, and shall have contracted guilt, shall even bring a ram without blemish from the flock, at a price of silver for his transgression to the Kahan. The Kahan shall make atonement for his trespass of ignorance, wherein he ignorantly trespassed, and he knew it not, and it shall be forgiven him. For he has surely been guilty of transgression before Yahuwah. I think this is a very important chapter. And from what I see in this chapter, this points to whether Yahusha is Mashiach or whether he's not Mashiach. You see that, touching unclean things, not just this alone, but certain things that we touch or certain things that go on, can defile us and make us unclean. Now, you have certain people that will say that being unclean is the sin, but very clearly here it's showing that, when you have become unclean for whatever reason and it escapes your notice, and you don't do something about it, there are different types of things that defile. There are different types of uncleanness, and each one has its own type of deal. Most of the time it's just, washing your clothes, your garments, and washing yourself before the sun, towards the sunset, before the new day starts, and then you're clean. But here it's showing when it escapes your notice, when you don't recognize it, then that's when it becomes sin for you. And we know that Yahushua was constantly, he was constantly around. I'm not exactly sure what constitutes uncleanness, but we know that he touched dead people. We know that he raised the dead, the little girl that was dead. I think he literally touched her. He touched the woman with the issue of blood, or she touched him. But regardless of whatever it is that makes you clean, it's not necessarily becoming unclean, at least from what I see, that makes you sinful. It's that if it escapes your notice and you don't do something about it, then you have to bring your offering to Yahuwah. And we know that Yahushua was without sin. So if he became unclean in any instance, around any person that he came across or any person that he may have touched, I would assume that he was automatically doing these things. He was automatically cleansing himself, rather than it escaping his notice. Just a thought.
Yep, definitely agree. Yeah. And there's multiple times people would say, oh, people try to change the whole, whatever you want to call it, Passion Week, because supposedly he can't ride on a donkey, and all this nonsense. So they have to change stuff and have to make allowances in scripture that he couldn't be riding a donkey on the Sabbath. Supposedly that would have been bad. I get it, beasts of burden, but but that's really a gray area there. That's really, at the end of the day, he's just riding on a donkey. He's not making it do work for employment. He's not, but I've heard crazy theories out there why they got to change the date of the Passover because supposedly he couldn't do this, he couldn't do that. And, that's why, again, I say we got to be careful not to take rabbinical interpretations of Torah commandments and go crazy with the uncleanness thing. Because some people will say, well, Mary and them couldn't go to the tomb because they would become unclean on the Sabbath. Well, if you can show me one verse in Torah where it says they're commanded not to go to a tomb on the Sabbath, I'll agree with you. But there's no command that says that they can't be ceremonially unclean on a Sabbath. So you see people change stuff in scripture or try to eisegetically interpret stuff just to, oh, well, they would break Sabbath by walking to a tomb. No, they wouldn't. No, they wouldn't. The reason that they had to come to the tomb after the Sabbath had to do actually with the fact that they couldn't buy the perfumes, okay? Has nothing to do with whether or not it would be sinful or not walking to a tomb becoming ceremonially unclean, okay? Because I've heard stuff like that. I'm just hand to face. I'm like, that's a rabbinical interpretation. That really is like, there's no commandment about that. You don't, and again, that's why some people think it's not okay to have intercourse on the Sabbath, this and that, and you get crazy rabbinical because they think you're not supposed to be ceremoniously unclean on the Sabbath. If you can show me a verse for that, I'll change my mind. If you can show me one verse where Yahuwah verbatimly says you cannot become ceremonially unclean on the Sabbath, I'll change my mind. But, anyway, that's just Doug's little rabbit trail there. But, I just, that's my pet peeve about certain things. It's like, again, what Brother Yahusha said is 100% fact. Being ceremonially unclean, you're not going to prevent that. I see people going crazy, like trying to prevent from becoming ceremonially unclean. The unclean commandments themselves don't tell you to avoid uncleanness, by the way. They don't tell you, oh, you need to make sure if your wife is having a period that she has to have her own chair to sit on. That's not a commandment. That's fine if you want to do that, but that's not a commandment, just to let you know, to prevent yourself from sitting where a woman with an issue sat, just to let you know. There's no commandment that says you can't sit on the bed that a woman that has a period sat on. If you actually read that whole chapter in context, the commandment is actually if you do touch her when she has her period, or if you do sit where she sat, you have to bathe in water and you're unclean till evening. That's the actual command of that chapter. So I just want to make a distinction with that too, because that a lot of people misunderstand that. So there, it's fine if you have a tradition of doing that in your own home. That's fine. Just remember that's not a commandment to do so. So if you want to have your wife who's having a issue, her monthly issue, to sit on her own chair, that's fine if you want to do that. But anyway, so other than that, I think what we just did here, chapter 5, that was pretty more self-explanatory. I do like the Septuagint has abominable here. Kind of makes it a little bit clearer what's being talked about here, what type of dead bodies and stuff like that. So specifically talking about the carcasses of unclean animals, which you see, by the way, in Leviticus 11, if I'm not mistaken. So this gets expounded upon later on about what you're supposed to do if you're not even supposed to touch the carcass of an unclean animal, according to Leviticus 11. So right here, this is kind of like an overview, you could say, of the uncleanness, what you're supposed to do if you touch a carcass of a dead, unclean animal, like a pig, and all that. So, yeah. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. So this was talking about the what offering they would have to give for if you transgressed, if you touched something that you didn't know you've touched. And I think we've talked about this before, but I think it's important to make a note of that. Like I said before, we all are going to become ceremoniously unclean at some point in time. There's no way to prevent that. Either you go to a funeral, like Brother Yahusha said, or you're eventually going to become ceremonially unclean by something. Something will escape our knowledge, and by mistake will become, unclean until evening, and we have to bathe in water. I mean, that's pretty much what happens. So, so I just don't want people putting heavy burdens on themselves, trying to prevent themselves from becoming ceremoniously unclean. The only time in Torah that I remember, if I'm not mistaken, that you have to worry about being unclean is for one of the feasts, Passover. You don't want to be, you want to, really try your best to not be ceremoniously unclean for Passover. And if you are, then you have to wait until the second month. That's the only time I see that, like, we need to be cautious of not becoming ceremoniously unclean. Really. Let's frankincenses and all that. Okay, so I think I'll just finish this off with Leviticus 6, and then my mom could do Job 1 for us.
Okay.
Mom, is there anything you wanted to mention from what we just read?
No, I just, this probably is really, it should be obvious, but I'm wondering, how it always says to hold the head? Is there something symbolic about holding the head of the beast that is going to be the offering?
I know for atonement, there's a spiritual significance, this Day of Atonement. I know in Leviticus 16, there is a purpose for that because you're transferring the sins of the people to one of the goats.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know in general if that's what's going on, but I do know the Day of Atonement. There's a significance for that, like holding the head of the animal while it's being killed and all that.
Yeah. It is the most vulnerable part.
Now in the Day of Atonement, though, they're actually holding the head of the live animal, the live goats. I don't want to confuse people. They're sending the live goat into the wilderness to this person called Azazel. And, again, Azazel is not the goat. I know a lot of people misunderstanding on that. That's a whole nother topic. Especially those that don't want to accept certain books, want to think that Azazel is referring to the goat being sent. But anyway, so yep, go ahead, Brother Yahusha.
I'm not sure if I'm following, like holding the head. Like, what are you referring to?
I think was asking me about why do they hold the head of the animal when they kill it at the
symbolic about the head.
Like she's asking, is there any spiritual significance to why they would hold the head of the animal while like slaughtering?
I would say that if you're slitting the throat, the throat is where you want to slit so that the blood drains out properly.
Yeah.
No, I see that. I just wondered it because the head is really the most vulnerable part.
The only spiritual significance of that would be the Day of Atonement. Okay. That's the only thing I've seen in the Tanakh that literally points to something, because their sins are being transferred to the live goat sent to Azazel in the wilderness. And that's, I don't know I haven't seen anything, any other significance where holding the head of the animal is something spiritual. I don't know.
I think that there might possibly be something deeper there. It's definitely something to meditate on. And the reason I just say that is because a brother was bringing up, he was reading through Joshua, and this was literally today. He was reading through Joshua, and you have them standing on the necks of the 5 kings, and then afterwards cutting their heads off. If I believe that they did, but they're standing on the necks, and the neck is connected to the head. And we slit the neck of the animal while holding the head. So I don't know.
I might look into the Targums about it. They might have some commentary on it. Because I do know that a lot of the animals for sacrifices, right, were what the Egyptians would worship. And the goat itself is a representation of Satan in certain religions. So I kind of wonder if spiritually it could connect to the trampling on the head of the dragon, trampling on the head of Satan, because you're holding the head or putting your foot on the neck. There could be some type of symbology there, talking about crushing, the head of Satan and all of that.
Point to Mashiach, then I could see like holding on to Mashiach, who's our head.
Yeah, that would probably make more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that I think I would go with that one. Yeah. So holding on to the head as Messiah is our head, he's chief in command over us. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Go ahead, Sister Sadia. I think you had your hand up too.
You know what I thought of right away? There's got to be something, because when the guys got captured by Al Qaeda, they put them all along the beach and they cut their heads off. So
Yeah.
there's got to be some kind of a symbolic meaning
Yeah.
that's more than we really understand.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
do know that prophecy says that those that believe in Messiah will, be beheaded. So even as a
Yeah.
literal prophecy, that could have been something connected to that. I don't know much about the whole Al Qaeda thing, because I think in their religion, they're just told to, do that to infidels. I think that's a
But
general.
could it be they got it from the Quran, which maybe they got it from like what you're reading right now, and
Yeah.
they twist it, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh,
But
they
it's
don't.
there.
They don't obey any type of Torah, because the way they kill people in their countries, they throw them off of buildings. They do this. They do that. They don't.
Oh,
They're supposed to stone people that they're throwing off of buildings according to Torah. They're supposed to stone adulterers. They're supposed to stone people that commit bestiality and homosexuality. You're not supposed to throw them off of buildings and do this and that. So they're I don't know what they're doing. The spirit that they're doing that stuff in is not the Yahuwah spirit. I can tell you right now. Yahuwah might be using them for a purpose, especially with taking down idols, like how he was doing that they were doing that for a time, taking down all these places of Baal worship. Yahuwah might be using them kind of like he uses the wicked sometimes, but I don't think they're doing anything righteous in what they're doing. They're looking at
exactly.
Infidels are
Evil. Evil.
They just look at anyone who's not Muslim as an infidel, so they'll just kill them just for the sake of killing them. And they especially the jihadists. The jihadists are very violent. They don't care who you are if you're not a Muslim, because supposedly it's rumored in the Quran, which I haven't seen it, by the way. I haven't seen any of this type of jihadist stuff ever in the Quran, so I think people have made that up. That tells them to do that. I don't think anywhere it says to kill an infidel. Because people have made assertions. A lot of Christians have made assertions about the Quran without even ever reading the Quran. That it tells them to lie to an infidel to gain their trust and kill them. It mentions nothing like that in the Quran that I've seen. So they're a lot of what they do. The radical Islam people, they do it of their own will. They do it of their own hatred for infidels for whatever reason. Whatever spirit they're under is causing them to kill people for really no reason. As far as you'll have innocent Christians being killed for no reason. Your head's cut off for no reason. I could understand why they do it to homosexuals, why they do it to people that come over to their country and try to become sodomites and try to sodomize their land. I can see why they do that to those type of people. But
isn't it funny that they hate that so much, but in Israel they have gay parades?
Yeah, Israel is very liberal today. I think they're one of the biggest liberal countries out there. I think there's very few conservatives out there in that country anymore. It's the gay capital of the world. It's the homosexual capital of the world. And I think I was talking to Sister Josie about this the other day, actually. I was telling her what I think really what 1940 was really about. 1948 was creating the spiritual Sodom and Gomorrah over there. And I think really that's what that is over there. It is not Yahuwah's Israel. No, it is Satan's Israel, as far as I'm concerned. Over there.
True.
And it's the end times Israel that will be led by Satan and the beast, according to what prophecy says. I know a lot of Jewish people that are listening don't believe in the New Testament, but if they did, they would understand that where they're living right now is going to be the headquarters for the anti-Messiah. And because they're taught not to read the New Testament or believe in the New Testament, they are deceived and they don't realize this. So they're living in Satan's Israel right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's literally what's going on over there. That's why when people go over there, I pray for them, because I'm like, man, you guys don't realize how evil that state is over there. You don't realize what you're doing by going over there. I would never go over there. Never. Right now, I would not want to be anywhere near there. We don't even know when the Antichrist is going to make his appearance over there in that temple. So I don't want to be anywhere near there. Yahushua himself says those that are there flee to the mountains when the abomination of desolation happens. I don't know why anyone would want to be there and live there right now. I really don't get it. But anyway, but yeah, that's the whole difference between the Palestinians and the Ashkenazi Jews over there. Is it's very liberal in the land of Israel today versus in the Saudi Arabia type of countries. They hate homosexuality. They hate certain things in their religion does agree with the Torah, but they twist it. They don't do it correctly. They'll kill a homosexual by throwing them off a bridge. They don't hold Torah really. Other than the way they eat and the way they kill animals, that's about the only Torah they really keep. Other than that, the rest of their religion is man-made rules they make up. They don't really care how they kill an infidel. They're not led by the Father Spirit. They don't worship the Father. They worship another deity. So, but anyway, just wanted to explain that just in case people are wondering, my thoughts about that over there and the jihadists and all that. No, I don't think that's righteous what they're doing. They're taking upon themselves without any type of real Torah government and just going crazy and killing people. But anyway, so let's see here. All right, so I was at verse 2, I believe, the soul which has sinned and willfully overlooked the commandments. So this is talking about like on purpose, sinning on purpose, of Yahuwah, and shall have dealt falsely in the affairs of his brother. And I'll explain later why I paraphrase neighbor as brother. I'll explain later why I did that. In the matter of a deposit or concerning fellowship or concerning plunder, or has anything wronged his brother, or has found that which was lost, and shall have lied concerning it, shall have sworn unrighteously concerning one of all the things whatsoever a man may do so as to sin hereby, it shall come to pass, whensoever he shall have sinned and transgressed, that he shall restore the plunder which he has seized, or the injury which he has committed, or restore the deposit which has been entrusted to him, or the lost article which has been found of any kind, about which he swore unrighteously. He shall even restore it in full, shall add to it a fifth part besides. He shall restore it to him whose it is in the day in which he happens to be convicted. So, and again, if you look in the whole Torah, the Torah describes our neighbor as our fellow brother or sister. The Torah itself will not describe your neighbor as, common humankind or any way that the Christian church would interpret it. Nowhere does it describe your neighbor as that in the Tanakh. And remember, Yahushua said, I did not come to bring new doctrine. In John 17, he literally says, I came to bring my doctrine is from the one who sent me, meaning that Yahushua is not going to make some new definition of who your neighbor is. He's going to honor what's already been pre-spoken. If he's the living Torah, that means he is Leviticus 6 as well. Okay, he can't contradict what's already been written and spoken from himself. Okay. And he shall bring to Yahuwah for his trespass a ram of the flock without blemish, of value to the amount of the thing in which he has trespassed. And the priest shall make atonement for him before Yahuwah, and he shall be forgiven for any of the things which he did and trespassed in it. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, charge Aaron and his sons, saying, this law of whole burnt offering, this is the whole burnt offering in its burning on the altar all the night till the morning, and the fire of the altar shall burn on it. It shall not be put out. And the priest shall put on the linen tunic, and he shall put the linen drawers on the body, and shall take away that which has been thoroughly burnt, which the fire shall have consumed, even the whole burnt offering from the altar, and he shall put it near the altar. And he shall put off his robe and put on another robe, and he shall take forth the offering that has been burned out within the camp into a clean place. And the fire on the altar shall be kept burning on it, and shall not be extinguished, and the priest shall burn on it wood every morning, shall heap on it whole burnt offering, and shall lay on it the fat of the peace offering. And the fire shall always be burned on the altar, it shall not be extinguished. This is the law of the sacrifice, which the sons of Aaron shall bring near before Yahuwah, before the altar. And he shall take from it a handful of fine flour to sacrifice with its oil, with all its frankincense, which are upon the sacrifice, and he shall offer up on the altar a burnt offering as a sweet smelling savor, a memorial of it to Yahuwah. And Aaron and his sons shall eat that which is left of it, and shall be eaten without leaven in a set apart place. They shall eat it in the court of the tabernacle of witness. It shall not be baked with leaven. I have given it as a portion to them of the burnt offerings of Yahuwah. It is most set apart as the offering for sin and as the offering for trespass. Every male of the priests shall eat it. It is a perpetual ordinance throughout your generations of the burnt offerings of Yahuwah. Whosoever shall touch them shall be set apart. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, this is the gift of Aaron and of his sons, which they shall offer to Yahuwah in the day in which you shall anoint them. So this is like almost like a setting apart type of offering. They're being consecrated. In the day you shall anoint him, 10th of an ephah of fine flour, a sacrifice continually, the half of it in the morning, half of it in the evening. And it shall be made with oil in a frying pan. He shall offer it kneaded in rolls, an offering of fragments, an offering of sweet savor unto Yahuwah. The anointed priest who's in the place of his son shall offer it. It is a perpetual statute. It shall be consumed, all consumed. And every sacrifice of a priest shall be thoroughly burnt and shall not be eaten. So this is a specific sacrifice that can't be eaten. The law of the sin offering. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to Aaron and his son, saying, this is the law of the sin offering in the place where they slay the whole burnt offering. They shall slay the sin offering before Yahuwah. They are most set apart. The priest that offers it shall eat it in a set apart place. It shall be eaten in the court of the tabernacle of witness. Everyone that touches the flesh of it shall be set apart, and on whosoever garment any of its blood shall have been sprinkled. Whosoever shall have it sprinkled shall be washed in the set apart place. Okay? And the earthen vessel in whichsoever it shall have been sodden shall be broken. And if it has been sodden in a brazen vessel, he shall score it and wash it with water. See, this is where context is important. This is talking about an offering that was sodden in an earthen vessel. It's not talking about a regular meal animal you're killing to be cooked. Okay, so I want to make that very clear. This is talking about an offering. Okay, this is where context is important. Because if you don't use context in that verse, you're going to think every time you cook an animal to be food and you boiled it in or sodden it in a vessel, you need to break the earthen vessel. But if you look at the context, it's talking about offerings. Every male among the priests shall eat it. It is most set apart to Yahuwah. And no offering for sin of whose blood there shall be brought any into the tabernacle of witness to make atonement in the set apart place shall be eaten. They shall be burned with fire. Okay. And that's the end of our Leviticus reading. Now we have two people with hands up. I think Sadia was first. Go ahead, Sister Sadia.
That was an old one. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Okay.
It's okay. So I'll let Brother Yahusha go, and I'll explain a little bit, just do a little bit explanation how I know our neighbor is actually talking about a fellow believer and not just anyone. Go ahead, Brother Yahusha.
I was just thinking that because I was reading this yesterday and I was like, and yes, I get the context that it's only in an offering, but these offerings are also being done on like a daily basis almost, right? So that's a lot of things being broken. So I wonder if they were like constantly making these things that they were having to break. I don't know if you come.
Yeah, they were not buying them. Yeah, no, there was no such thing as selling pottery in Israel. I don't think so. Yeah, they would have been most likely making them by hand with the clay and all that. I'm pretty sure they knew how to make, mold the clay into vessels. Yeah, I think it would be stupid too to buy them if you're got to worry about breaking them every time you do a sacrifice. That would waste a lot of money. Yeah. I'm assuming they're making them by themselves. So this, thankfully for today, we're not in a Levitical priesthood where we have to worry about stuff like this. But this is something we're going to have to be mindful of in the millennium and be very careful of. With these type of vessels having to be broken when you sodden or boil, an animal that's for an offering in it. So, yeah, it's definitely something to keep your eye on and definitely take a note of certain stuff like this in the Torah. Now I know some people might be saying, how do I know our neighbor is our brother? Okay, so I'm gonna go to one verse I found recently from even the book of James that even shows this, even in the New Testament. He literally has neighbor and brother in like the same verse together. How stars and angels are coupled together a lot of the times in the same verse. Show you something here. Let's go to Blue Letter Bible here. Most of the time you'll see this too when it's talking about their neighbor, especially with the you're kind of forced to have to understand it as their brother, especially when you go to the chapters in Leviticus. I don't think we got to them yet, but where the sabbatical year is and all that, that's when you're going to start seeing what I'm talking about. So let's search the word neighbor, King James, and you'll see what I'm talking about here. And I believe it's Leviticus 15, it might be. I forget which one actually talks about the sabbatical year and the Jubilee year and all that, the year of release, and how you're commanded to release your brother, but not a Gentile, and all that. See here. Okay. All right. So let's start off by going to, let's see if I can find the one in James that I'm thinking of. Yeah, James 4:12. Says here, only is the lawgiver judge and he who is able to save and to destroy. But who are you that wants to judge your neighbor? Now, if you go to the prior verse, it's talking about unrighteously judging our brother. So literally the context is our neighbor is our brother there in the New Testament, mind you. So this is a lost understanding that we don't have because Christianity has lied to us and told us everyone's our neighbor. So that's why, and some of us have not taken off our, as Lex would say, our goggles. Lex Meyer recently did a video about we need to take off our goggles, and I agree with him. A fellow brother, Lex Myers, the unlearned guy. He recently did a video about we need to take off our goggles. We need to understand things from, a Hebraic perspective rather than a Greco-Roman perspective. The majority of the time in scripture, if you look at all the times it's talking about his neighbor, it's always in the context, even with Paul's letters, your brother is your neighbor. It's always in that context. The only time you see that in the Tanakh that you could get some kind of ecumenical understanding would be with when they're what's it called, plundering the Egyptians, right? In Exodus 3. It says they asked of their neighbor and they asked the Egyptians. So some people will point to that. But after that, almost every time after Exodus, the Torah identifies our brother as our neighbor. Almost every other time. Go ahead, Brother Yahusha.
That first verse. No, go up. Dare any of you having a matter against his neighbor, go to Torah before the unrighteous and not before the Kadashim. That neighbor, like even in the context of that verse alone, just that single verse, that neighbor has to be Kadashim, because you wouldn't take, if you had a matter against, let's say if you had a matter against someone of the nations, you wouldn't bring it before the Kadashim because they wouldn't be subject to the Kadashim. But if you had a matter that was against, if I had a matter that was against you, I could bring it to the Kadashim because you are subjected to the Kadashim. Like we are all supposed to be subjected one to the other. So even in the context of just that one verse alone, it proves that like your neighbor is your Kadashim, your neighbor is a fellow believer. So
yeah, and what confirms that is Ephesians 4:26. Speak truth with one another with his neighbor. And obviously there was no commas in the original text, so it would just be a full same statement for we are members of one another. So again, your neighbor is someone who's part of the body of Messiah, not some random Hindu or some random person on the street. So again, we have to take off our Christian goggles. And, I'm not trying to sound facetious or anything, but I'm just being honest that we need to take off certain understandings that we've been taught and have been misled, because now we're still reading the scriptures 4, 5, some of us 6, 7 years later, still with those Christian goggles on, still not understanding because we have not unlearned what we need to unlearn. And so again, Exodus 18:16 is talking about the context of Israel, right? Who was the law given to? Israel. Judge a man between a man and his neighbor, okay, his brother. So again, the whole Torah is about how Israel is supposed to treat one another. It's all about how are we supposed to treat our brother and sister. What does 1 John 4 say, right? If you don't love your brother, how do you know Yahuwah without loving your brother? Doesn't say everyone. This is the problem, that we've learned an ecumenical type of faith from Christianity that tells you to treat everyone the same, which is, according to Yahuwah's word, he tells us to treat our neighbor as ourself. Yes, we're to love the world and witnessing to the world and doing good deeds here and there. I get it. But he never says to treat the world like you treat your brother. He never says that. So that's why I'm bringing this up. It's important for us to take these Christian goggles off and let scripture say what it says.
Quick question though.
Yeah.
Okay, Doug. So we understand it as how we're taught because for sure it says they're Kodashim. And so that would be, we know what that means. But as the Christians, they would look at it as in their belief to take it to one another. And then they are so blinded. I mean, not that they're, their eyes are not open. But they take it to your neighbor next door. That's not a believer. That, they extend that forgiveness beyond just what the word says because they don't know any better. And so in a sense, they're doing right, but on the other hand, they're being deceived because they don't know that the most important thing is that you don't fight amongst each other. You
Yep.
take care of business, you handle it.
Mhm.
And if there's an issue, you bring it to the council. If the, once you try to do your best, but, sometimes, that takes a little bit of understanding. And some people, they forget, and I don't know how, but it happens
Yeah.
that you handle things within each other. And that is the beauty of it. And as for Christians, I have to say, more power to them to forgive one another. But there's more meaning to that because, they're widespread as to they don't know who their neighbor is. They don't know that our neighbor is us.
Yeah.
I mean, it's between these people because,
Yeah.
you don't know who your neighbor is today. He
Mhm.
could be a mass murderer, and or just an evil person. I was on the TV last night, and they have a show that's about hating your neighbor. Something about your ugly neighbor or something like that. I don't know what it is, but they actually record how your neighbor will pour concrete in your house or do all kinds of bad stuff.
Yeah.
And they're recording it, making a show out of it. I'm like, what, are we so morbid
Yeah.
that this world has gotten that bad that you will make a movie, a sitcom, or whatever you want to call it, these things, and make a movie out of it? I don't know. It is horrible, but may their eyes be opened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm glad, Joshua, you said take it to the Kodashim because that's the key factor. Because that's it. That is it right there.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Says so. I just want to show the viewers and listeners what I mean by this. By Scripture gives us the definition here. Here's one example: Leviticus 19:16. Literally says, "Among your people." Notice that phrase there. You shall not go up and down as a talebearer among your people. So it's talking about their ethnicity. Neither shall you go against the blood of your neighbor. Notice how neighbor is being defined as their people. So again, this is why I say we got to take those goggles off because
Excellent.
Scripture is very clear about this, who our neighbor is. When you look at the Tanakh, and like I tell people, Yahusha cannot bring his own doctrine. He cannot change biblical definitions of things. This is why people get hung up on the Sethite theory because they're not letting Tanakh definitions that are already pre-established in Genesis 6 and Job 1 and 2, letting it say what it says, and they're trying to take a New Testament definition of something out of context. And so when we get these weird doctrines, we're getting these weird doctrines because we're not letting the law of first use say what it says. And the law of first mention is something even seminary college tells, supposed to be teaching preachers this. You take the law of first mention. Okay, so neighbor is defined as someone's brother or their own people ethnically. So that should be universal throughout the rest of the Bible. That's what their neighbor is. Go ahead, Brother Yahusha.
I'm glad. So Sister Milka brought up Matthew 5:43 and 48, and that's along the lines of what I was about to actually touch on. I would agree with both of y'all on this. Like, yeah. Hold on. I'll be right with you. Give me a second. 1 second. So I lost my train of thought. I would say that one, our Mishpachah comes first.
Yeah.
You know, we put one another, we're, you know, Yahusha is our first priority, and then one another comes first, but then we are also to be a light unto the nations. We're to be a light,
Mhm.
you know, to the Goyim. We're not to hate them or to love them, but love in that, in the sense of what it is truly saying, love your enemies, rebuke them that curse you, do tube to those that hate you, has to be in the context of the
Persecution.
Torah. It has to be in the context of, you know, sharing the Torah with them, not just like if I'm going to go out and if I give a meal to someone, you know,
Mhm.
that has to be in the context of me sharing, doing it to share the Torah with them. You know, we see Yahusha eating with sinners and tax collectors, and we see Shaul going to the Goyim, but
Mhm.
in the context of witnessing to them. So I would agree with both that there has to be, you know, we do love our enemies. We are a light to them. We don't just
Yeah.
shun them, you know, but
Yeah.
in the context of fulfilling the Torah.
Yeah. I think also let's define here what's an enemy. Is every Gentile an enemy? Or is someone seeking my life an enemy? Someone seeking my life is my enemy. Someone that hates me is my enemy. Yahushua is saying love your enemies. He's not saying love everyone. And this is something that a pet peeve I have in mind that we still have from the Christian church is this ecumenicalism. Where did the phrase enemy become the whole world? I'm truly asking here. When did the word enemy mean every single person on this earth? Does not mean everyone. He's saying the point Yahushua is trying to make here is he's saying love someone that hates you as much as you love your own brother and sister. That's what he's saying, or not even as much. He's just saying in general, you should love someone that you don't like as well as you should love your own brother and sister. He's not saying you got to love everyone. I'll show you guys why we can't take an ecumenical interpretation of it. I'll tell you why. I'll give you guys proof of this, why you can't. Yahuwah tells us to hate his enemies. Yahuwah even gets mad at someone for being an ally of his enemy. Okay. I'll show you guys. I believe it's from one of the book of Chronicles. Do you love the person Yahuwah hates? So we have to understand there's a difference also between our enemies and his enemies. And the word never tells us to love every single person. So we have to be careful not to be adding to scripture either. So we need to, I don't know what the heck these people are doing over here. But I'm going to show you guys this is something important that the Almighty tells us. And he says, you are not to be allies of my enemies. So again, this is why I think it's important to establish this concept, because a lot of us just assume because it says to love our enemies as well as we love our neighbor, that we take a universal understanding to that, when it's not universal. It's talking about two groups of people, right? Our brother and sister, our neighbor, and our enemies. It's not saying to love everyone. So we have to let scripture speak for itself. Okay. And it said, so let me see if I can find the verse I'm looking for. Do you love the person Yahuwah hates? So Yahuwah makes it very clear we are not to love his enemies. And if that's the case, you're not commanded to love everyone. You can't have it both ways. Here's one example here. Psalms 15:4. I'll just give you an example here. Psalms is big on this. Yahuwah hates the sinner. Okay. I'm just going to give you an example here. Psalms 15. Psalms 15 verse 4 is about despising the vile person. Okay, so this is why we can't take what Yahushua says in Matthew 5 and build a whole new doctrine around it. This is what I mean by Yahushua did not come to bring a new doctrine. Okay, so we have to take what he says in context of the prophets and Torah. Psalms 15, verse 4, in his sight, all evil workers are set at nothing, but he honors them that fears Yahuwah. He swears to his neighbor and disappoints him not. So again, so we have to take scripture as a whole, guys. We can't just take one isolated verse from Matthew. Can't do that. So yes, we are to love the world in a certain way, witnessing to them, like Brother Yahushua mentioned. Showing compassion to them, yes, but we're not supposed to love them like we love our brother. It's what does it say in Exodus 20? The first time he gives that commandment, he says, "Love your neighbor as yourself." He does not say love everyone as yourself. He says, "Love your neighbor as yourself." Yahuwah makes distinction between his people, how his people are to treat one another, and how we're to treat the world. You cannot eat an animal that dies of itself, but you can sell it to a Gentile. This is what we need. We need to start unlearning this ecumenical understanding that we treat everyone the same. There's nowhere in the Torah does it say that. It says, it's the love that he wants us to have for the world, from what I've seen, it even in the Brit Hadashah of itself, is talking about compassion, mercy, helping them when you can. But like Brother Yahushua said, you don't put them above your brother and sister. We're supposed to treat our brother and sister better than the world. So that's what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying that you should hate like every non-believer. What I'm saying is, Yahushua, in that verse that was brought up, it says, love your enemies, right? Not everyone's your enemy. So even with Gentiles, you can't say every Gentile is your enemy. You need to love them. Yahuwah is saying love your enemies. And by the way, Yahushua's pulling from context in the prophets where Elisha was, remember, Mom, how Elisha, his enemy sought his life.
Mm-hmm.
And what did he do? Elisha fed his enemy, right?
Mm-hmm.
As coals upon his head. That's the context when you're talking about loving your enemies. An enemy is someone seeking your life or that hates you. That's an enemy. Nothing else. You can't say the whole world is your enemy. That, again, we got to get rid of this Catholic goggles nonsense that everyone's your enemy and that we have to love the world because, it says love your enemy. No, it says love your enemy. Enemy is an isolated group of people that would hate you, seek your life. In war, your enemy is a army on the other side. Go ahead, Brother Yahushua.
I'm not sure I follow that one, because like if they're against Abba's Torah, how can they not be an enemy?
Because enemy, if you look it up in the dictionary, is someone that's fully against you. Yahuwah has enemies and we have enemies. Yahuwah doesn't put everyone in the same box. He even tells us to hate his enemies. So if we put everyone as our enemy, then we're going to eventually love someone Yahuwah hates.
Well, I mean, if they're against his Torah, then they are against my life spiritually, because regardless of what they're
bro,
trying to
it's
do.
not talking about spiritually. That verse in context is if you look where he's quoting from with Elisha, it was someone physically seeking his life that he fed. He's talking about a physical enemy. He's talking about people persecuting you. He says it right in the verse. It's talking about persecution right in the next verse. It's not talking about everyday life. This is what you're supposed to be doing. If someone asks a garment from you, give it to them. Like they're plundering you. If you look in context, it's talking about people forcefully taking your garment. So that's why I'm saying we have to take everything in context. Everything has to be taken in context, or we're going to be having Yahushua bring new doctrine, because there's nowhere in the Torah or the prophets that says to do that. Nowhere does it say to do that. That every time you see someone that is spiritually not a believer, you need to help them out. Nowhere is it commanded in the Torah or the prophets. So we need to understand enemy is a distinct a distinction, because if he wanted to say do that to everyone, that's how he would have commanded it. He's commanding us to do to our enemies, to love them. And if you look at other places in the Tanakh, it's about burning hot coals over their heads. It's about making them feel bad about themselves because they're seeking our life. It's not about, that's what you're supposed to do every day if you see someone in need on the street. I think this is the problem why we don't understand this, is because we still have those goggles on us. We still have those Christian goggles on us. We're not letting the scriptures say what it says. If Yahushua wanted us to do that, like treat every Gentile as an enemy, like you're saying, he would not even mention the word enemy if everyone's our enemy. There would be no point for him to do that. That goes against every type of rule of linguistics to make a specific mention of a specific group of people. You know what I'm saying? That he's making mention of a specific group of people or enemies. If everyone's our enemy, he would be wasting his time even distinguishing there. That there would be no point. That doesn't even make any sense linguistically for him to say, love your enemies, don't hate them, love them. And we see in the Tanakh that Yahuwah doesn't want us to even like his enemies. So in scripture, we have enemies and Yahuwah has enemies, and they're not the same. Like, for example, the kings of this earth, we're not to love the kings of this earth. They are his enemy. I can use multiple examples in scripture where there's a difference between our enemy and the Father's enemy. And it's not the same thing. So that's why I'm saying I understand people are not grasping this yet, but I would ask brothers and sisters, please pray about this, because I think this is a huge, huge burden we're putting on ourselves, thinking everyone's our enemy. It's a huge burden on ourselves, and we're not looking at the context, the full context of Matthew 5:43 into 44, where literally in the next verse he mentions persecution by name. So, like I said before, we have to take everything in context. We can't take one verse of itself without looking at the next verse or the verse prior. So we have to see that right in the next verse, he's talking about when you're persecuted. A lot of what he's saying in Matthew 5, when he's talking about what you're supposed to do to your enemies when you're persecuted. And even Elisha did what he did in that story because he was being persecuted. His life was being sought after. So we have to look at everything with the context of what is the chapter in context talking about. And you really don't see the disciples doing that to their enemies all the time. Even if we were looked to after Yahushua's ascension and the apostleship and the apostles and what they did, they were not helping out Gentiles all the time. They were not doing that. They were witnessing to them, like you said before. They were maybe helping them out as a tool of witnessing, but they were not, worried about Gentiles in need all the time. They were worried about their own people the majority of the time. They were worried about their brother and sister. They were not worried about, if there was a poor Gentile in Israel to help them out, because they had enough hard time helping out the poor Kadashim. They had enough time. So that's why I say we need to be careful not to put heavy burdens on ourselves and ecumenicalize things that are not supposed to be ecumenicalized. So that's all I'm going to say for brothers and sisters that are not there yet where I am. I just ask that you pray about it, really seek the Father on this, because I believe this could be something that we're still holding on to with Christian glasses for goggles. And, I'm just going to end with that. But anyway, so go ahead, Sister Sadie. I think you had your hand up. I don't know if that was an old hand. That might have been an old hand. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Mom.
it was. It was. Okay, so what you're saying, in a short little box, okay? What you're saying is that there is people out there that are our enemies, and we're to forgive them, right?
Yeah, we're to love our enemies, like Yahushua said. To put it in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is not everyone's your enemy.
Okay.
Yahushua,
Not everybody's a headhunter, right?
Yahushua, just because spiritually someone's a tear doesn't make them an enemy. When Yahushua is talking about enemies, you have to take it in the context of what was done even in the prophets. Like I said, Elisha was a Syrian was seeking his life, so he fed that Assyrian. It was a physical enemy. It wasn't just spiritual. Like, I guess that's the easiest way to explain this. When it's talking about an enemy, it literally means an enemy. Like, it literally means someone that's at odds with you, that hates you, that seeks your life. Because doesn't Yahushua somewhere else, Mom, say, if we love those that love us, what do we have?
That's right.
We should love those that
Even the
hate
tax
us.
collectors do
Hate.
that.
He uses the word hate. So you can have a Gentile you're witnessing to that doesn't hate you. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's very, I'm trying to choose my words carefully here, but I think it's very dishonest to say everyone is our enemy just because spiritually they're not a child of Yahuwah. So we interpret every worldly person an enemy. And I mean, that's not the case physically.
No, it makes sense.
You
I get
know,
it.
so that's
You
all.
know, like, okay, for example, when I came to Torah, all my Christian friends dropped me like a hot potato. They even talked about me. Some
Yeah.
left the phone on and I
Yeah.
overheard the conversations,
Yeah.
which was very painful. But I just understood they don't know any better. They don't know. They're still blinded and they think that I went into an occult. Well, or I became Judaism. You know, I became some Jew. But
Consider
you know,
that yeah. Someone that's hateful towards you, someone that just can't stand you and slanders you. Yeah, that's an enemy.
I'd
So,
love to find out who that one is out
so
there.
according to Matthew 5, even though they've done all those things to you, you're supposed to, in a certain
Forgive.
circumstance, forgive them and
Yeah.
if they're in need. But again, I also think we also overlook in verse 44, it's talking about persecution. I think, and I mentioned to a brother about this recently. If you look in the very next verse, it's talking about persecution. So I think also Yahusha really was focused on a specific context of when we're supposed to do that to an enemy. And it's like when we're being persecuted is being and you kind of see this with Yahusha when he's being led up to the stake. You kind of see this where he's not talking back to them. He's kind of, he's obviously, they take his garments, stuff like that. I'm pretty sure if they asked for his garment, he would have gave it in that context. So you kind of see this in practice with Yahusha being led up to the stake. And I believe where Matthew 44 is going to come into play is when the tribulation happens. You're going to have people really putting us in jail, really real persecution, physical persecution happening. I think that's where this actually becomes, applicable in verse 44 of that chapter. But also, I'm not saying either. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying don't help out a non-believer. I'm just saying as far as what we're required to do according to commandment, I think is different from, you feel sorry for someone and give to them, I think that's the distinction I'm trying to make. And first and foremost, we're required, like Brother Yahusha said, brother and sister first before a non-believer, because we're supposed to love them as ourselves, not everyone as ourselves. So that was the main point I was trying to bring up, was what Yahusha was already bringing up. Go ahead, Brother Yahusha.
Not to change the subject, but it just kind of hit me really hard.
Yeah.
You have Yahusha telling them that, he would be taken. You have him telling them that they would be taken, that they would be persecuted, that he would be persecuted. And we know that we're going to be persecuted. And yet we know this and we're still continuing to go this route. Like, that's crazy to think of, like, we know that as we continue this route is going to lead most likely to our death, most likely to us being martyred for the faith that we have. And yet we continue. Just crazy, man.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's promised. We're promised that we're gonna have to go through stuff like that. So I think it's anyways good to change gears. I don't want to beat a dead horse on that, but that's just something for all the viewers and listeners to think about. Just something to think about. Have we fully taken off the goggles of the church off with our understanding of scripture? Because that's something that who has been showing me in the past couple of years who our neighbor is and all that. So so anyway, my mom's gonna be finishing us off. Let me just get a new recording going, guys. So this is the end of the Leviticus portion. Next we'll be going into our one chapter of Job. So